Someone Better by I_am_Ellie on AO3. Episode 23, Chapter 18, Happy Birthday. The cafeteria was rows and rows of steel tables, steel trays, and steel forks on steel plates. Next to every lunch tray sat a tablet, and every tablet was powered down, the little green arrow on the top completely absent. The guard that had led them to the mess hall departed as soon as they arrived, probably assuming that there was no way four outsiders could cause trouble in a room full of people without getting apprehended. They waited in line for food, and Shouta was reminded distinctly of high school. He hated high school. They sat at the first empty table they came across. Shouta glanced around the room for unattended tablets, or ones they were left without a watchful guise lingering over them. Nothing. There. Two tablets down, a plastic table, and the corner of which was hanging precautiously off the table. A tablet that, should he be careful, would be easy to take. Shouta set down his food, jerking his head in Hisashi's direction, before tilting his head in the direction of the tablet rested. Hizashi nodded, standing up from his place on the table and walking over to the other table with him. Because it was Hizashi, it didn't take long for the man to strike up a conversation. When everyone's attention was focused on Hisashi's, Shota's hand slowly crept closer and closer to the tablet. It was easier to grab because of the corner, hanging off the edge of the table. Just barely. Shouta quickly tucked the tablet under his shirt, turning on his heels to walk back to his own table. His heart was beating rapidly, and his limbs felt stiff, his knee smearing with pain. That was over. Now he just had to do what came next. The door to their room was unlocked with a bobby pin and a well-placed blow to the hinges with Vlad's quirk. It wasn't quite dramatic like Shouta had been expecting. No sirens, no alarms, no quickly approaching running footsteps. It almost felt too easy. Hizashi ran towards him before he could exit the room and grabbed his wrist, pressing two items into his palm: a hide drive, probably for whatever was on the computer, and a small silver knife with a leather handle. Simple, efficient. Both items had been carefully hidden in the small compartment in Shota's suitcase. Before he could pull his hand away, Hisashi's hands clamped tighter around his wrist, and he raised an eyebrow in question. "Can you do this?" was the question left unsaid. Shouta nodded, pulling his hand out of Hisashi's grasp and shoving the hard drive into his pocket, the small knife never leaving his hand. This was where he had meant to come in all along, the stealth hero. Quiet, with quick reflexes. He could see why he was good for the job. He glanced down at the tablet. Several dozen of buttons, all with different initials, but one caught his attention the most. MR. Meeting room. The little green arrow guided his way down the silver hallway, past dozens of identical doors before stopping at one silver door in particular. Another bobby pin in a lock, and a tablet scanned across the digital lock, granting him access to the same red-painted room with its dark flooring and heavy wooden table. And there was a laptop, sitting on the desk. Shouta hurtled towards the desk, opening the device quickly and opening the files. Lesser official documents, but still enough for substantial evidence. Shouta put the hard drive into the slot on the side of the computer and transferred the files into the little plastic wedge. Heart racing and hands feeling sweaty, he did another sweep of the room. He grabbed the knife and twirled it around his fingers nervously, with practiced ease. A door, a hatch, anything. And there, behind one of the large paintings, he see a faint light shimmering through. And there was no way that this man had a hidden room behind a painting. But when he eased the portrait to the side, what he found was an aged Mulholland door, and it was such a stark contrast to the plain, identical doors that linked the halls, it made his head spin. A hand reached out to ease the door open. The cold of the knob felt like it was practically biting into his skin, and there was the man from earlier. The man with the ponytail, sleeping in a king-size, four-plaster bed. His lamp was still on. On the floor, a dirty shirt. On his bedside table, a picture of a pretty girl. It was also overwhelmingly human, that made Shota's insides twist uncomfortably. He is responsible for the deaths of children, Shouta thought. Him. It made it easier to lift the knife, and slowly, through gasped breaths and shaky knees, walk towards the man's bed. The metal of the knife glinted in the light of the lamp. Shouta felt like he might be sick. And just before he could bring the knife down, a loud, piercing, vibrating screech that shook the floor. The knife dropped from Shota's hands, flying up to cover his ears, as the scream grew in volume and pitch. The picture frame of the pretty girl on the nightstand shook so much that it fell on the floor and shattered into a heap of glass. The screech cut off abruptly, and right after his hands fell from his ears, there was a heavy body knocking into him, taking him to the floor. Shouta tried to sit up to fight the man off, but then there was the feeling of metal biting into his neck. He felt a sharp sting and the drop of blood dripping down onto his collarbone. Well, well, the man said, pressing the knife in more intensely. I knew there was something off with your group. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. Shouta tried to reach up to push the knife off, but the man tuttled, pressing it into his skin harder. Sharp knife, friend, the man said. Wouldn't want to slip. Shouta tried not to breathe too suddenly. There were panicked voices now, and the sound of corks being occupied. A woman's terrified cries. Shota's own panic breathing. He felt like the walls of the room were closing in on him, because they were. Walls dragged against the carpet, that dragged against the floor. A large scraping symphony that was hell on his ears. The man's grin widened. I should get rid of you, the man said. Get rid of those who want to kill me so I could get on with my business. But maybe I'll give you a reminder. The tip of the knife, just barely touching his skin, but enough to split it. 3 lines, 2 horizontal, 1 slash connecting them. A-Z, carved right between his collarbone. Deep enough to bleed, and just enough to leave a noticeable scar. But it would be okay. He had other scars. He would be okay. Tensei barreled into the man just before he could carve something else. Sashi, Shouta cried, sitting up. Sashi, where's Sashi? Tensei frowned, looking pained. 50 feet away, Hizashi Yamada lay still, a pool of blood gathering under his head. The next morning, midday, Izuku rode from school in an ambulance and was immediately rushed into emergency surgery. And Shouta Aizawa laid curled up in the corner of the hospital waiting room, knees gathered up close to his chest, and head tucked against them, hard drive burning a hole in his pocket, a bandage on his chest, and the beginnings of stubble once more lining his jaw. His birthday was in a few hours. Happy birthday to him. So, how are we feeling? I know, sad chapter, really short too. That's the end of all chapter, 18. We're gonna get into the next chapter, next one, which is also gonna be broke up into parts because no fucking way I'm gonna do that long ass one. But let me read the chapter summary for chapter 19, The Way Life Works. Shouta, come on, we have to get up, Nemuri said, tapping at his knee. Shouta curled further into himself in the corner of the waiting room. Shouta, come on, we need to go. You have to get some sleep and some food. Can you hear me? Shouta could hear her, but he wasn't sure he'd be able to answer if he tried. It was like there was something lodged in his throat, preventing speech and making it hard to breathe. There was still adrenaline from pain and panic therming through his chest, still blood stained in his hands, and making his hair stick to his neck, but it was fading and was quickly beginning to replace by a sense of overwhelming dread and pain. Oh, that's literally the first couple words of the first paragraphs of of chapter 19, which is the way life works. I'm not gonna do my predictions because, as I mentioned before, I already know what happens. I desperately already know what happens. I already know what's gonna happen. And actually, I think I now remember what happens to Izuku, which if so, my stance still stand that stress, in the sense of stress of, you know, losing somebody close to him and people that he loves, drove him to a physical response in his body. But yeah, how are we feeling, everybody? How's everything doing? Anyways, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds, have a wonderful day or night. Link to our Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.